Mitchell Barak, expert pollster and veteran political analyst here in Israel. Welcome. How are you today?
Thank you.
So this is an exciting day, an interesting day. I was noticing that in the popular vote, Kamala Harris was way off of the Joe Biden totals and didn't even come close to the number of votes that he got earlier. The polls seem to indicate that it would be much, much tighter in the popular vote. How do you assess Kamala Harris as a messaging expert? How do you assess her messaging? Where did she lose the plot?
Well, I don't think she really told people what she wanted to do, meaning we never really got the impression what Kamala Harris is all about, what she plans to do in from January 20th for the first 90 days, for the first year, what her plan was. We didn't understand, where she differed from the administration of Joe Biden. And she didn't communicate really very much about herself. Now, she had a lot of momentum in the beginning when she was switched as the presidential candidate. Of course, now one should ask, was that such a wise move? We don't know. But she had a lot of momentum in the beginning, including a massive amount of donations and money and people really coming out of the woodwork to support her. But she never was successful at articulating what she is all about. And she turned at some point and spent most of her campaign attacking Trump. And guess what? Everyone knows everything there is about Donald Trump. So the people that voted for him know all that stuff.
So it wasn't going to turn anyone off. So let's turn our attention to Israel. It's well known at this point that Kamala Harris was campaigning on one messaging on Israel, more of a pro-Israel message in certain states like Pennsylvania, and on a more anti-Israel message or pro-Palestinian message in states like Michigan. And a lot of hay was made out of this by the Trump campaign. But on a practical level, she's now essentially still in power. We don't really know who's in power in terms of Joe Biden's effectiveness as a president. But right now we're heading into the transition period between the election today and January 20th, when the Trump administration will come in. How do you foresee the Israel policy in this critical transition period while Israel is facing some very serious strategic situations?
Well, I don't think it's going to change very much. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with that assessment that, yes, she was campaigning on a pro-Israel message in Pennsylvania and other places. I don't think it was an anti-Israel message anywhere. I think she and President Biden have a very serious frustration dealing with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is not the easiest person to deal with, according to many, many world leaders. And also the images coming out of Gaza and even Lebanon are, within the Democratic Party, people are questioning what is the role of the U.S. in this and how much more does Israel need to do in Gaza. So I think it was, not against Israeli objectives, which she reiterated a number of times, including in the debate, that she was solidly behind Israel's right to defend itself, solidly condemning the attack of October 7th from the Islamic Resistance Hamas movement. The question was, she and many, many other people in the administration and among Democrats and even many Israelis say it's time to end the war and move to a ceasefire, that's in Israel's best interest and the United States' best interest.
So moving to the Jewish vote in America, we know that there was some growth in the Jewish vote for Donald Trump, for the Republican side. According to Pew Research, in 2020, about 28% of Jews in America voted for Donald Trump. We don't know really exactly what the number is. Maybe you have more of an inside scoop. But how much of the move towards the Republican Party in the Jewish community in America that we've seen in this election campaign do you think is permanent? Do you think that there's a sea change going on in the Jewish community?
Yeah, I'm just looking for something now. I don't think that there was a big move. In New York, for example, Jews voted 67% for Harris and only 31% for Trump. In New York, it was a little bit higher. It was 56% versus 43%. So there is significant growth, but I'm not convinced that it is really, that significant in long term. The vast majority of Jews are, not as religious as you and I, and they prefer kind of liberal democratic values, which are not seen as being embodied by the Republican Party or Republican candidates. I think Israel was an issue in this campaign, but at the same time, there hasn't been, many would say in Israel and the United States that President Biden, was really, I think history will judge him as having saved Israel after October 7th, meaning we have two B-52 bombers in the region. We have aircraft carriers that have been back and forth here, and we've gotten $18 billion worth of additional military assistance above the $2 billion we get every year. We can't really afford, our defense without the United States. And that has always been the case, that the United States has been very generous, and we have been a good ally. But certainly under President Biden, he stepped up to really save Israel. I think that the issue of anti-Semitism was serious in the United States, and a lot of people there don't feel safe and don't feel comfortable and feel that they're under attack. They're under attack on universities, and the universities are not doing anything to protect them. They're under attack in their synagogues and their streets, and they just don't feel protected.
You brought up the fact that there wasn't as much of a surge as I was implying in terms of the Jewish vote. I wasn't implying that suddenly there was a majority voting for Donald Trump, but we did see some movement. But still, a significant majority of American Jews do vote Democrat and identify more with the left. And you mentioned that religious people like you and me, we tend to be in the bucket that leans more right-wing. 80% of Jews who identify as Orthodox back in 2020 voted for Donald Trump. But we've also seen now in Israel, with polling that was released just last week by Channel 12, not a right-wing outlet, not a religious outlet here in Israel, showing that 2/3 of Israelis prefer Donald Trump. So beyond this election, are you concerned, or how do you interpret what looks like a growing gap politically in terms of the Israel-U.S. relationship between the attitudes of Israelis, as reflected by polls like this, and the attitudes of their brothers and sisters in the Jewish community in America?
Well, I'm not sure that it's 2/3. I have seen that poll. I'm not sure if it's really that many. It does seem to be that the Republicans are better from the Israeli point of view, meaning certainly on the issue of Palestinians and the settlements are important to many Israelis. And there is many Israelis are not looking for a short or even a long-term solution to that problem. They don't think it's a problem. They just want the pressure off from the United States when it comes to, settlement communities in Judea and Samaria, and when it comes to Palestinians, not even in Gaza, just in Judea and Samaria. And the Republican administrations have tended to be more willing to let Israel do what they want to do. And certainly the Trump administration the first time around was very, very favorable on many, many issues, including the Golan Heights, including Jerusalem as the capital. Whether it was wise to cancel the international agreement with the Islamic Republic of Iran remains to be seen, because it was canceled and nothing was done since then. But certainly Trump is seen as giving Israel a lot of leeway and not putting pressure on Israel, and the fact that which is kind of ironic, that he's really almost like one of us. He's like one of our family. And he really likes Jewish people. That's due to his daughter and son-in-law who are Jewish. But ironically, we've had 3 presidential candidates in this election, and all 3 of them have Jews in their family tree. Obviously, Vice President Harris is married to a Jewish man, and Biden has Jewish grandchildren, and he has a son that married a Jewish woman. And certainly Biden, for everyone that knows him in the decades that he's been in the Senate, he is a Zionist through and through, and he is as comfortable at a Shabbat dinner as he has anywhere else in the world.
So you're not concerned about any rift or growing rift between Israeli political sentiment and the political sentiment of Jews in America?
No, I mean, I think that a lot of Jews in America do not necessarily agree with Israeli policy. Israeli policy has been, for the last pretty much 14 years, has been the right-wing Netanyahu government, and this government being the most right-wing of all. And for a lot of Jews, it doesn't sit well. And, you also have, the issue of the day has to do with yeshiva students and whether they do or do not go to the army. And a lot of people can identify with that, even in the modern Orthodox communities in America, and certainly the conservative and reform. And then of course, those issues are important to Americans, and we don't necessarily represent some of those liberal and open views here in Israel, at least the government in the last number of years, because it's headed by Netanyahu.
Well, as someone, Mitchell, as someone who has a couple of kids, I have a few kids who've been fighting this war, and I certainly identify with with what you're saying about the issue of yeshiva students who don't serve in the army and the rift that it caused. Even those of us on the right have discomfort with some of the policies of this current Israeli administration. We have to wrap this up, but I think that going forward, we just have to hope and pray that we get through this transition period well, and that the incoming Trump administration goes back to things like the Abraham Accords and some of those positive policies that really brought greater peace and prosperity to the region.
If I can make one more point about diaspora
Sure.
Jewry, I think also we didn't take diaspora Jewry so seriously. For us, it was a relationship like, we do what we want, don't tell us what to do. And after October 7th, we found that diaspora Jewry has our back, and the amount of money that they raise and the way that they stepped up to pay for things like your kids probably told you, they don't have enough equipment in their army units. How is that? And who's paying for that? And a lot of diaspora Jewish communities stepped up in support in their local communities, and absolutely in financial support and getting the equipment and whatever was needed shipped to Israel. And that's an amazing thing.
That's a very important perspective. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Mitchell Barak, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.